Welcome to Green Beauty Conversations, the podcast that challenges you to think about how you buy, use, make, and sell your natural beauty formulations. We tackle topics that will make you think and encourage debate about green beauty with your friends, followers, or customers. I'm your host, Lorraine Dahlmeyer. I'm a chartered environmentalist, biologist, and the CEO of award-winning online organic cosmetic formulation school, Botanica. We have thousands of students in 170 countries around the world who study with us to become organic beauty formulators and entrepreneurs. Visit our website at formulabotanica.com to try our free online formulation course. Today's podcast looks at raw beauty. You've undoubtedly heard of vegan beauty, clean beauty, and organic beauty. But did you know there's a subset of all of these niches called raw beauty? But what does it mean? How does it work? Which ingredients does it use? And what does it do for the skin? To answer all of these questions, I'm delighted to be joined by Nadine Artemis, author, aromacologist, and green beauty formulator with 25 years experience. She pioneered the luxury skincare and wellness brand Living Libations and authored the book Renegade Beauty, which helps people seeking an alternative to mainstream cosmetics. She's also passionate about everything to do with raw beauty, so who better to invite on today's podcast? Welcome to the podcast, Nadine.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So let's get straight into today's topic. How do you define raw beauty? Is raw beauty about the temperature used during formulation or about the amount of processing used during ingredients manufacture, or is there more to it?
That's a great question. And yes, I think there is more to it for sure. And for us, it's a philosophy to also express, a bit of a tone and a vibe of how we're choosing our raw materials. Because I find this day and age, and I first had my store in 1992. So I've been in this journey for a while. And even back then I was finding words hollow to use or like pure, natural. I want them to have meaning, but they really have lost their meaning in terms of beauty because like a lot of things are labeled pure and natural and they're not. And so for us and for me, raw is another layer that brings in and it's showing like that. And hopefully if it is being used to me, it should be signifying not using synthetics, looking at the raw materials in a way to me that's connected through philosophies of things like vitalism or essentialism. So essentialism is this thing a philosophy that feels like everything has its own innate character and that the idea is to bring it out. So that's what I feel like too when I'm formulating. And vitalism is this beautiful philosophy, I think is like coming out of the 17th century. And that's really about how we're honoring the complexity and the interconnectivity of our life and our innate spirit in it. And so that philosophy encourages like a connection to the elements, earth, fire, the sun, water, air, and really to the life force of nature itself. And so I feel like when we're tuning into those choices for raw materials, then we're allowing the breathability and the beauty of our own innate beauty to come out. And so we humans are interacting with the raw materials, right? So there's a relationship to that because everything has a relationship to creation. And so for me, the palette of raw materials is just so important. And when we're saying raw, that means like we're choosing a coconut butter, for example. Sure, there's great coconut butter out there. But then if you can go a little bit step further and make sure that when it was extracted, the lowest temperatures were used and it was done in a slower, methodical thing rather than trying to just sort of churn out the coconut butter. So yeah, it's like a nuance that hopefully defines things a little bit more. And it's not always about like the hardcore temperature of it, but for sure, I feel like things like the essential fat oils with fatty acids. So whether that's jojoba or olive or something a little more precious like rose hips, to me, definitely want all of those raw, cold pressed. And it also means not processing. So raw means like, sure, there's a temperature thing to consider, but it's not always like, even with raw food diets, right? There's still, some debates about that. So it's about temperature and a processing thing. It's not refined and it's not synthetic. So, because in the refining process of raw materials, wow, things to me really seem to go off base, which is like So we use beautiful jojoba oil. I love it. It's like one of the most expensive botanical oils or carrier oils to use out there, but it's so stable. It's actually a liquid wax. It's not really an oil, even though it's liquid. So it looks and feels like an oil, but it will solidify once you get to like colder temperatures and freezing. That's actually one way you know that jojoba is real, is if it is semi-solidifying, if it's colder. So we use raw, golden, organically grown. Now, a company that's like just like a classic commercial, like L'Oreal or something, nothing against them, but I just mean like big, they would probably get their jojoba oil that's been winterized, deodorized, and bleached. So that's what's happening to like even like your mazola, your canola, your supermarket food. So I see a lot of relationship here between like, are we eating whole foods or are we eating processed foods? And that's sort of where the raw is coming in too, to define that. So winterizing brings an oil to like a cold thing, but it's separating out the waxes so they can fractionate it and skim it out. So there's like a whole bunch of nutrients gone. Texture gone. And maybe that's so that the jojoba isn't, because if we ship you your beautiful best skin ever in the winter, it may come slightly solid, but it's not a problem at all. And it shows you it's real. Now, a big company may not want that hassle, but I think we can all just like learn these nuances and be okay with it, So then there's bleaching, which is like, again, it's like taking a beautiful oil and then bleaching out the pigments, which again are such a beautiful component for our skincare. And I feel like the pigments in plants really work with there's a top layer of our skin, that the epithelium, which has 5 layers. There's the stratum corneum, and then there's a melanocyte layer and the basal layer. And it seems like the pigments really reach into those layers and work with that relationship. Again, a lot of it's science and a lot of it's a bit of that mystery. And we're still trying to discover why everything's interacting how it does. So that's the bleaching. And then there's deodorizing. So then they're doing a high heat to get rid of the aromatic compounds, which again, there's information in there that I think our skin wants. So it's almost like they're just stripping it of everything to just get a clear, liquid, joyless oil, I think. And to me, it's like, well, why even do that? Like, just go use the petroleum again,
I love that. Joyless oil. I'm going to use that one.
It's this lifeless liquid, It's not so fun. And you remind me of, there's a rare occasion where I go to a studio and would do a TV thing. Now, luckily, it's like the whole world's going, okay, we're going to do everything from home. So that's fun. But so on that rare occasion, then maybe I'd have a makeup artist come, because it's part of the whole thing. And of course, I always brought like everything, like brushes, because I don't want to use anything from that other world. And different times in different ways, they'll just be like, your skin's like different. It's like alive. And I just find they're like, wow, it's like living. And I'm like, yeah, I guess, So I just think it's like really, what we're feeding. I'm just a big believer that there's a symbiotic relationship, and what's going in and what's going on the skin needs to be simpatical with our systems.
I recognize so much of what you say. I mean, the formulators who come to us at Formula Botanica, they do so because they are inspired by their ingredients. And we often say that the authenticity of your ingredients is one of the most important things when you're formulating, because you make this connection with your ingredients.
Yes.
And, when they're colorful and they're rich in those botanical compounds and they haven't been stripped of all the goodness, that's when you're in the sweet spot of formulation. So I love everything you said.
Total sweet spot. And often, people, they're so kind over the years. They've been like, you're a great formulator or whatever. But I'm always like, it's the plants. It's just like, if I have quality, what can go wrong?
Exactly. Okay, so we have a bit of an idea of what sort of ingredients you should be using and what sort you shouldn't be using. So are there any shelf life considerations then when it comes to working with some of these raw beauty ingredients? Because obviously we're working with the essence of the plant here.
Yeah, I think there is, but it doesn't always mean like it's not always like a direct translation. So there are ingredients you don't want to work with, but again, you want to be working with things that are raw. So the raw doesn't necessarily, like, it doesn't inhibit choices, but you want to always work with, again, just the best quality. But, that can bring up things like essential oils, because those are born out of steam distillation, which may seem antithetical to raw. But again, if we're expanding raw, yes, there's temperature, but again, we're bringing in that essentialism point of view. So what does this material need to be brought out in the best way, really, for human consumption or for us to enjoy? But really, with essential oils, there's a whole bunch of varieties and different things too, but they really need to be born out of this moment. And it's a real ancient alchemical process. And they're not fatty-based material. So the raw element is just different in that realm. It's like a little bit of apples to oranges. So of course, with raw fatty oils that can go rancid, there's just such a tender way that we want to care for those. Now, essential oils, even though they have the word oil in them, they're not oily, like there's no fat. They're volatile, evaporative substances. So they have a way different tenacity. And there's, generally, if it's real and a pure, authentic distillation, there's no rancidity. Now, they can definitely, like the citruses, have a greater sparkle in the first 2-3 years than like 10 years down the road. But the blood orange 10 years down the road won't be like off or rancid. So, essential oils, we kind of suggest a few years, but we, like so many of them, really age beautifully. And when they were working with the Egyptian tombs and undoing these alabaster jars of oils, and gallons and gallons, like I think one tomb, they found like 70 gallons of oils.
Wow.
Which even in like prime manufacturing, that's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah. And they were all just still so aromatic and beautiful. So they don't have something that typically goes off or wrong. And they're all antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal, in varying degrees. They just have a whole different tenacity. However, within the realm then of choosing essential oils, you so want to know your source, the growing practices. There's such an art. It's like fine wine. There's also a process in steam distillation called hydrodistillation, which is steam distilling through low, slow temperatures that really create a very full aromatic oil. And in the lab tests, you can see that more trace elements are captured in a low, slow distillation. So then that kind of reminds me of like the slow food movement. So if we're thinking in terms of beauty ingredients, it's kind of like whole foods, raw, like not processed, and then, this slower processing. So these are all the things that we're looking for in our raw materials and the beautiful people that are making them and distilling them.
I love that. I love that. It's just about connecting with the essence of your ingredients, as you say.
Yeah.
So what are the biggest challenges when formulating raw beauty?
Well, on one level, I think there's a simplicity there because it's not, you're not actually working with, it's interesting because there's a level of complexity that is removed because I think simplicity comes up and slowness and handmade and not a lot of equipment is needed. That's very complex. So in the process is very simple. But on the other hand, you're working with things that are in their full potency. And so you've got that essential oil that has over 600 different botanical, chemical constituents, which is amazing. And those are mixing with others. So there's a synergy to care for. But I just never thought of it as challenging because it just feels like such an art to me.
Do you work with any water-based ingredients in your business?
Yes, we do. And of course, there's a whole other, care for that. And of course, we want to start with beautiful water that's also pristine and care for that. I feel too that I architect products a little bit differently. Like, for example, our deodorants. We do have a lovely cream deodorant. And then we also have these things called poetic pits, which are the main ingredient is actually sandalwood. And they're 100% essential oils. So it's actually more like a very concentrated perfume rather than am I just, finding an alternative to my secret stick or whatever. And so it's sandalwood, which generally is okay on most skin. Undiluted is the main thing. And it has a viscosity and a synergy to androsterone in the pits. So it just has such a harmony for that area. And people find, one swipe, each pit can last 2 or 3 days. So it's just basically, almost a miraculous thing. People will do hot yoga and work out, and people will follow them afterwards and still be like, oh my God, how do you smell so good? Poetic pits.
Poetic pits. Yes. I love that.
The cream deodorants are called underarm charms.
Great names. So one of the things that people often talk about when they talk about high performance beauty is that you need the water with the oil to be able to reach the lower layers of the skin. And obviously a lot of raw beauty will often end up using anhydrous ingredients because, of course, they haven't been heated necessarily. And, I know that obviously raw is a much, much bigger topic, as you said at the beginning, but is it still possible to make high performance beauty products with raw ingredients?
Yeah, I believe so, because I feel like you're working with something that's more effective and nutritive to begin with. So there's just more there for when the skin is drinking it in. It's just got more activity and more benefit. Also, you're talking about water and making things a little more active. And as we all know, like a lotion, a cream is oil plus water in different amounts. And so you can almost just really do that in a fresh way on your skin. In my philosophy and in my book, Renegade Beauty, I do talk about the microbiome a lot. So the skin's microbiome is really key. And it's something that we're really getting to know more about in the past 2 decades. Whereas before, coming out of the 40s, it was a lot of germ warfare theory and just like, let's just scorch earth policy, whether it was agriculture or the skin or your mouth, right? Even because I have a book, Holistic Dental Care. So that's a whole other thing. But just like, let's give mouthwashes that just kill. And then we went, oh my God, there's a whole beneficial microbiome. There's beneficial bacteria, and they keep the pathogens in check. We need to allow that. And so I do talk about, allowing the bacteria to be your beautician. We kind of got to step out of the way and stop applying things that are harming our skin and the microbiome. And so this idea that these surfactants, these squeaky clean surfactants of things like sodium lauryl sulfate are supposed to solve our skincare issues. But now with the study of the microbiome, what we're seeing is that these harsh surfactants are staying on the stratum corneum and not rinsing away even after, you wash your face. They build up over time, and they're these microscopic splinters of surfactants. They can see that under a microscope. And then that's creating a whole vicious cycle with the bacteria on our skin, the sebum, the pores, the whole story. And so soap is not something that I advise using to wash the skin or face. You want to do pits and bits and just keep it to that. And then for our skin, I look to older methods, ancient methods where, in ancient Roman, Greek, Moroccan cultures, Egyptian cultures, it was all about the oils, but to also cleanse and to moisturize. So whether it was the face or applying oil to the body and then using tools called strigils in some cultures to take the oil off the skin. So we can do the same with oil and a cloth. It's it's called oil cleansing. But of course, we don't want to be using baby oil, petroleum oil, or rancid natural oils like peach kernel or almond. So there is finesse there, and it may sound weird to wash the skin with oil, especially if you've had acne, but people really see how it turns the skin around, especially when you're working with something like jojoba, because what I feel, and it seems to be, is that, and there is science behind it, but I do feel working with jojoba for over 25 years, it really has a beautiful synergy with sebum. And so we definitely want to be using microbiome-friendly products. So that takes us back to cream, which is water and oil. But if you, wash your face, spritz it with frankincense water or just water, and then you apply the oil and you massage it in, you're kind of making a cream on the spot on your skin in a very basic way. So that's why even applying oil to the body, once you've gotten out of the bath or the shower and the skin is just open and there's still damp, that's a great time to apply the oils because they really drink in.
So you've talked a lot about the different oils that you use. We talked about, essential oils as well. How do you feel about dermal limits that have been set? And I mean, I know here in the EU, for instance, they are quite a lot stricter on them than other parts of the world. But how does that work with raw beauty in your opinion?
Yes. Well, of course, the poetic pits, again, you're just one stroke. Again, it's not going all over the body. But yeah, I think the limits are good. But essential oils, we also have to remember, are so effective. We're talking like one drop, of sea buckthorn contains over 160 bioactive substances. Or like, I think the stat is like one drop of steam distilled rose otto is like the equivalent to 60 rose heads. So, they're potent substances that are so effective in minute amounts.
So how do you demonstrate that raw cosmetics have higher nutrients or antioxidants or more enzymatic activity? Have there been any studies to back up some of these claims?
Well, I think we can find studies when we look at food. And so we can see benefits in the processing of coconut oil, honey, chocolate. It's just a better story on the nutrient level. So I feel like there are studies for sure. And even like tomatoes are good raw, but then we also see some of its stuff has to come out through heat, like the lycopene, so we got to look at everything individually, but generally also, I just feel like we have the track record, on an anecdotal level. It's like, I've been doing this since 1992. I have some customers that are like still from that day. And I think it's just the effectiveness just keeps people coming back. And we also, on our website too, we do independent lab studies on all our raw materials, and we have those up as well so that people can see the quality.
What sort of lab studies do you do?
We just do like your basic, we do like a third-party one, like here, take this. And so, every essential oil will have the gas chromatography reading and that kind of stuff.
So are there any sustainability considerations when it comes to raw beauty?
For sure. I feel like there's sustainability issues for every beauty product now, even synthetic, right?
Yep.
Because then we've got petroleum issues and all that, or soy. Like, we could look at soy as an alternative, but we can also look at its devastation in the rainforest, right? So there's a lot to consider, which is one reason why we don't use like soy in our candles, because you got to weigh each thing. It's hard.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How do you take that into consideration when you're choosing new ingredients?
Well, yeah. So again, we have to look at like, is there sustainable issues for a plant? Or is it hard to get right now? So then maybe we will work with some of our distillers in different countries in Africa and then look to co-op into a plot of land and then specifically grow a plant there that's going to help the local economy and just be a good story for us and them. If it's like India sandalwood from India, I mean, we had to look at alternative sources even back in the 90s. Because that was coming up. Or rosewood's an issue. But then a few decades ago, I found somebody that's just doing, the twigs and it's certified. So you can find things that are sort of fragile ecosystems, but then sometimes you can make it a better story and you can ensure the viability more. But yeah, I think we have over 300 raw materials that we bring in. And some distillers may do 10 of our oils or whatever. So it's not like we have maybe 300 different suppliers. So it's just a dance with all of them. But what I love is that most of our raw materials are really coming from some honed in relationships that I've had for a few decades.
Fantastic. So what advice would you give to raw beauty formulators? I mean, we have all sorts of people listening to the podcast, people who make green beauty, who use it, who buy it, who sell it, but specifically for the formulators, how can they best source ingredients to ensure that their nutrient load is at its highest, for instance?
Yeah. So I think a good thing to start with is developing your relationships. I mean, your relationships to your suppliers are just as key as your relationships to your clients and your team. So it's very key. And also you want to have fun with them. So sometimes if things maybe it's good quality, but it's not so fun, maybe we'll look for somebody else because you just want it to be a good situation all around. So that's really important to develop those relationships. And then I think you really want to develop your nose library, so to speak. So you want to smell essential oils from all over. You want to smell the sort of MLM quality. You want to smell the really beautiful, organic, authentic quality. And just even if you're at a health food store, just smell. And you'll really start seeing the nuances because then you'll know what they're like in that final ingredient. And it really, it just pays to use the finest material. For sure, because it really does make your life easier. So really exercise your nose. I found early on, this area would just, anytime it's synthetic, even if it's a pretty decent synthetic, like it's like, oh, is that almost, like a nature identical? I just have like a whole alarm that goes off here.
And you're pointing to your
yeah, my third eye. I'm sorry. Yeah.
For those of us who can't see you.
We can see each other. Yeah. So my sort of pineal gland area just feels so weird. You might have something in your body that kind of gives you an alarm as well. And that's sort of part of the next point, which is really developing your intuition. So maybe your intuition is also going to help you find that distiller. That intuition is going to help you discern the raw materials and discern that. So that's really good. And then develop your expertise and also have a relationship with a lab. So, because you're going to want to send everything there, every new batch, just to get the ins and outs. And that's really important. And then, just hone in on your expertise about that raw material or that plant, like get to know it. I love Tisserand's book, Essential Oil Safety Data Manual. I think everybody
big fan.
needs that. And thank God that exists, because we do need it standardized. And I just love Tisserand.
Yeah, Robert and Hannah are fantastic, and we're big fans and good friends with them. So, and they've always been on the podcast too. So if anyone wants to check that out, to head over to, I think it was episode 6. I completely agree with you. I mean, you have to rely on your gut feel when you're doing anything in business, but particularly when you're getting to know your ingredients, you have to go with your gut on what feels right and which relationships are right and how to develop those relationships. So that's wonderful advice. Thank you so much.
You know what else is fun is smelling without looking at the labels. You get so much information. It's kind of neat. Like just pick up the bottle, don't look at it, and it's a whole new world.
I can imagine. I think I would be terrible at that. But it does sound like a fun activity. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Nadine. If our listeners want to find out more about you and your brand and the book that you wrote as well, where can they find you?
Well, thanks for having me. And our website is livinglibations.com. My book's there and really anywhere that books are sold. And come visit us on Instagram too. And you can just see where we create everything on the land here in Canada.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
So I hope this podcast has inspired you to investigate raw formulations and raw ingredients. Nadine is such a pioneer in this industry, and it's wonderful to learn from her more than 25 years of experience. She is such a powerful advocate for potent botanical ingredients in beauty and wellness, and the longevity and success of her career speaks for itself. In fact, here at Formula Botanica, we are such big fans of raw beauty that we even teach a whole lesson on it in our advanced diploma in organic cosmetic science. So if you are interested in adding a raw component to your beauty range or learning how to make raw beauty, make sure to check out our advanced courses on our website. Which raw ingredients inspire you the most? Which ones do you want to use on your skin? Please do join the discussion and leave us a comment on our social channels to tell us what you think. The Formula Botanica team and I love hearing from you, so do come and tell us your views. Thank you for joining Nadine and I for this latest episode of Green Beauty Conversations, where we looked at raw beauty. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify and stay tuned for the next episode. Follow Formula Botanica at Formula Botanica on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Pinterest, or LinkedIn. We are everywhere. Visit our website at formulabotanica.com and sign up for our free online formulation course today.